Good morning, class.
Good morning, Ronald.
Today's subject, the Hamburglar.
You remember the rule. If it was on your plate, you were eating it, whether you liked it or not. And back then, that meant choking down lime green Jell-O with shredded carrots, or canned meat that looked like it came from outer space. Some things were sweet, some were salty. Most were just plain strange. We didn't ask for these grocery items. They just showed up in our lunchboxes, dinner plates, and awkward family potlucks, and somehow we were expected to smile and chew. Well, guess what? They're gone now, and we're not exactly crying about it. So let's take a look back at the odd, the rubbery, the weirdly wet and questionably edible grocery items we were forced to eat, and are honestly glad never made a comeback. Jello salad molds, tomato aspic, savory celery, shrimp suspended in goo. You remember walking into Grandma's kitchen and seeing that shimmering tower of terror on the counter, a translucent orange dome with mysterious chunks floating inside like specimens in a biology lab. The tomato aspic, they called it. Savory Jell-O with celery bits, maybe some shrimp if you were really unlucky, all suspended in wobbly, salty gelatin that jiggled with every footstep. Back then, gelatin salads were the height of sophistication. They showed you had time, skill, and a proper mold collection. Every church potluck, every holiday gathering featured at least 3 variations of vegetables or seafood trapped in flavored gelatin like insects in amber. But let's be honest, biting into what looked like a festive dessert only to taste tomato-flavored rubber with surprise crunch elements was a special kind of childhood trauma. The texture was wrong, the flavor combinations were questionable, and somehow shrimp floating in red Jell-O never quite achieved the elegance it promised. Looking back, we're grateful that salad now means actual vegetables instead of seafood suspended in wiggly tomato gel. Progress tastes so much better. Libby's Vienna Sausages, floating in murky mystery liquid. You'd pop open that little can and there they were, 8 pale bloated fingers floating in cloudy brine like something preserved for a medical museum. Vienna sausages came swimming in their own mysterious juices, soft as Play-Doh and twice as salty, with a texture that somehow managed to be both mushy and rubbery at the same time. These were the ultimate convenience food of the 70s and 80s. No cooking required, protein in a can, ready to eat straight from the tin or thrown into whatever casserole needed bulking up. They were cheap, shelf-stable, and marketed as a quick meal solution for busy families. The problem was everything else about them, that unnatural pink color that matched nothing found in nature, the way they'd fall apart if you looked at them wrong, yet somehow resist chewing, and that lingering aftertaste that made you question every life choice that led to this moment of eating mystery meat from a can. Thankfully, we've discovered that actual food tastes better than whatever those pale floating cylinders were pretending to be. Sometimes convenience isn't worth the compromise. Canned salmon with skin and bones, crunch optional. Nothing quite prepared you for opening a can of salmon and finding what looked like a complete archaeological dig inside. There were the familiar pink flakes, sure, but also dark skin pieces that peeled off in sheets, tiny bones that crunched between your teeth like broken glass, and occasionally a mysterious vertebra that made you wonder exactly which part of the fish you were about to consume. Canned salmon was marketed as nutritious, economical, and convenient, all the benefits of fresh fish without the expense or hassle. It was the protein backbone of salmon patties, casseroles, and countless budget-friendly dinners that stretched one can into a meal for 4. But picking through your food like you're defusing a bomb takes some of the joy out of eating. Every bite became a careful excavation project, checking for bone fragments and trying to ignore the darker, chewier bits that definitely weren't supposed to be there. The constant vigilance required turned mealtime into a dental hazard. Modern canned salmon is deboned and skinned, proving that sometimes food evolution means not having to perform surgery on your dinner. We've kept the convenience and lost the crunch, and we're all better for it. Tang, astronaut-approved orange powder. You scooped it, you stirred it, you watched it turn into liquid sunshine, and then you drank it like you were heading to the moon. Tang was the drink of the future. The commercials said astronauts drank it, and that was all we needed to feel cool while sipping a cup of orange-colored sugar water at the kitchen table. It made you feel like part of a mission, just without the rocket. But let's be honest, it didn't taste like oranges. It tasted like battery acid with a spoonful of sugar and a splash of artificial color. It was less citrus grove and more science experiment, a flavor that promised adventure but delivered aftertaste. Still, moms loved it. No peeling, no squeezing, no waste, no refrigeration needed. Just add water and boom, juice. In a world before juicers and organic labels, that was gold. But then came frozen concentrate, then came real juice, and eventually Mom started turning the carton around and actually reading the ingredients. That's when Tang's days were numbered. By the 90s, it was fading fast. And today, unless you're a vintage snack collector or planning a moon landing, you probably haven't thought about Tang in years. Let's just say, we're not pouring one out in its memory. Space food sticks. If you grew up in the space race era, you remember these. Long, brown, chewy sticks that looked like candy bars but tasted like disappointment. They were marketed as astronaut fuel, cutting-edge nutrition straight from NASA. That was enough to get every kid begging for them. Who didn't want to eat like a hero? These things practically came with a mission patch. But once you bit in, reality hit hard. They were dense, dry, and had a texture somewhere between a stale protein bar and a rubber eraser. You kept chewing, hoping flavor might arrive eventually, but it never did. The taste hovered somewhere near chocolate, but never quite landed, more like space dust wrapped in sadness. Still, they landed in lunchboxes across America, because, hey, space food, and if it was good enough for Buzz Aldrin, it was supposed to be good enough for us. You felt futuristic opening the wrapper, until you had to swallow it. Eventually, even kids stopped pretending to like them. The novelty wore off. The chewiness didn't. And when they disappeared from shelves, no one called Houston about the problem. In fact, we kinda celebrated. Pillsbury Funny Face Drink Mix. Before we had a fridge full of juice boxes, we had packets of powdered sugar with goofy cartoon faces. Goofy grape, Lefty lemon, Rootin' Tootin' raspberry. These weren't just drink mixes, they were characters, mascots, and mini marketing machines designed to charm kids right off the bat. You dumped it in a pitcher, added water, stirred it with a big wooden spoon, and there it was, grape-colored sugar water that turned your tongue purple and your insides fluorescent. It didn't matter if the flavor was questionable, it was loud, it was sweet, and it was fun. Kids went wild for it. Parents let it slide. Dentists probably wept. Each glass was a sugar-loaded science fair in a cup, packed with more artificial dye than actual nutrients. But at the time, no one cared. It was cheaper than Kool-Aid and came with more attitude. But eventually, Mom started reading labels. Kids started preferring real juice, and even the funny faces couldn't compete with changing tastes and health concerns. By the late 80s, Funny Face quietly vanished from grocery shelves. Another childhood sugar bomb retired. Tuna Noodle Casserole. The ingredients were always the same: canned tuna, egg noodles, cream of mushroom soup, and maybe some crushed chips on top if someone felt fancy. Sometimes peas were thrown in, but let's be honest, they didn't help. It was hot, it was creamy, it was economical, and it was on nearly every kitchen table from the 50s through the 80s. You couldn't escape it. If you grew up during that time, chances are it showed up at least once a week, maybe twice, when the grocery budget was running low. It came in Pyrex dishes with foil tops and strange smells that filled the kitchen long before dinner was served. The truth? Most of us just powered through it. It didn't matter how hungry you were. By the third spoonful, it all blurred into a hot, salty, fishy mess. The tuna was aggressively fishy. The soup was thick and gluey, and everything had this strange beige-gray color that didn't inspire confidence. It looked like someone tried to make comfort food with things they found at the back of the pantry, and in a way, they did. But it filled you up, and for that, our parents swore by it. It was cheap, it was simple, it fed a hungry crowd in a hurry, but exciting, never. It was one of those meals you learned to accept, not love. Today, you'll still find the recipe in dusty cookbooks and church potluck tables, where tradition sometimes outweighs taste, and that's exactly where it belongs. Shakeup Pudding. Just add milk, shake it in a plastic cup, and suddenly, pudding. Or at least that's what the box promised. It was a fun idea on paper. Kids loved the shaking part. It felt like a science experiment and snack all in one. The commercials made it look like magic. The plastic cups had bright colors and fun characters, and we were sold before we even took a bite. But when it was time to eat, thin, lumpy, weirdly sweet goo that never quite set right. It jiggled in places it wasn't supposed to and always left a weird aftertaste you couldn't name. You never quite knew if it was done, and it always felt just a little wrong. It wasn't rich like cooked pudding. It wasn't smooth like ready-to-eat cups. It was its own strange thing, and not in a good way. It was like someone tried to reinvent pudding and forgot what pudding was supposed to be. Even as kids, we knew this wasn't real dessert. It was a cheap trick in a cup. Eventually, better options came along. Snack packs, homemade stovetop versions, real pudding with real flavor. And just like that, Shakeup Pudding quietly disappeared. And nobody ever asked where it went. Chef Boyardee Pizza Mix. If your family wanted pizza night in the 70s or 80s, there's a good chance Chef Boyardee was involved. It came in a box, and inside that box, a can of sauce, a bag of floury mix, and a packet of shaky Parmesan powder that smelled suspiciously like feet. It was a do-it-yourself pizza kit, the kind of culinary activity that brought families together, at least until the dough stuck to the counter and the sauce stained the curtains. We stirred that dough, rolled it unevenly, slopped on the sauce, and called it dinner. The crust came out more like thick bread, the cheese refused to melt properly, and the end result was a salty, chewy slab with memories baked in. Back then, it was exciting. Pizza at home. But once frozen pizzas started to improve and delivery became easier than boiling noodles, the boxed mix lost its charm. These days, with gourmet frozen pies and build-your-own kits from real pizzerias, Chef Boyardee's Pizza Night feels like a relic. And let's be honest, we weren't eating it for the taste. We were eating it because it was all we had. No one's been begging for its comeback. Puddings in a can. Before plastic cups took over lunchboxes, pudding came in little metal cans. You needed a spoon and sometimes a can opener just to get inside. These weren't cute or convenient. They were sharp-edged, slightly dangerous, and always came with a faint metallic tang that no amount of chocolate flavoring could hide. But for some of us, these puddings were a lunchroom rite of passage. You peeled back the lid, hoping it wouldn't slice your thumb, and dug into a thick, sticky blob of something that resembled chocolate, or at least was brown enough to pretend. Back then, we didn't think twice. It was pudding, it was sweet, and it made us feel fancy. But once plastic cups came along, smoother edges, easier packaging, and less metallic flavor, there was no going back. Today, the original can version is long gone, and while pudding itself has endured, we've all agreed that eating dessert shouldn't feel like opening an oil drum. No one's nostalgic for that tinny aftertaste or the minor hand injury risk. It had its moment, and that was enough. Carnation Slender. In the age of TV tray dinners and calorie-counting housewives, Carnation Slender promised to be the answer to every woman's dream. Weight loss in a can. It came in small cans or powder packets, ready to mix and sip your hunger away. With flavors like vanilla and chocolate, none of which actually resembled either, it sold the fantasy of nutrition without effort. Moms drank it between carpool runs. Dads sometimes grabbed one as a light lunch, and teens tried it thinking it would give them model-like bodies. Spoiler, it didn't. The texture was chalky. The flavor? Artificial at best, medicinal at worst. And no matter how many nutrients it claimed to have, it left you hungry an hour later. Still, in an era obsessed with slimness and speed, it fit right in. But as the 80s and 90s brought more awareness about real nutrition, balanced eating, and the dangers of crash diets, Carnation Slender started fading. Today, it's a cautionary tale, how diet culture sold us cans of sugar and chemicals and called it wellness. We know better now, and we're not drinking to forget. Hunt's Manwich. 1 can, 1 pound of ground beef. That's all it took to make dinner on a Tuesday night. Manwich was the shortcut meal of choice for countless families looking to stretch $1 and fill a plate. It was tomatoey, slightly sweet, and just spicy enough to feel like something had been cooked. You'd brown the beef, dump in the sauce, and pile it onto white bread or hamburger buns that always got soggy by the second bite. Half the meal ended up on the plate or your shirt, but somehow it still counted as a win. For a while, we loved it. It was messy, fun, and weirdly comforting, but over time it started tasting less like dinner and more like canned nostalgia. The sugar content was sky high, the ingredients list was a chemistry project, and people began craving meals that didn't come from a pop-top lid. These days, Manwich still exists, but it's more of a punchline than a pantry staple. Some folks keep it for emergencies, others keep it for memories. But most of us? We've moved on, and honestly, our shirts are grateful. Pillsbury Space Stick Frosting. At some point, someone at Pillsbury decided the future of cake decorating was a toothpaste-style tube filled with frosting. And we believed them. No more mixing powdered sugar and butter. Just grab the plastic tube, squeeze, and let the sugary paste flow. Kids were obsessed with it. It felt like drawing on a birthday cake. The commercials showed moms and children bonding over easy, mess-free icing like it was space-age innovation. And in a way, it was, until you actually tasted it. The frosting was often stiff, overly sweet, and carried that unmistakable chemical tang of shelf-stable everything. It looked better than it tasted, and by the second bite, the novelty wore off fast. But it was convenient, and for a while, that was enough. Over time, homemade frostings came back into fashion, and even store-bought tubs improved in flavor and texture. The idea of decorating your dessert with something that resembled edible glue just didn't stick. Today, Space Stick frosting lives in the archives of cool at the time, but let's never do that again. It got the job done, but nobody's searching for it on grocery shelves anymore. Miracle Whip. Let's just say it. Miracle Whip was the great sandwich divider. You either loved it with your whole heart, or you thought it tasted like sugary mayo gone rogue. Introduced as a cheaper alternative to mayonnaise, it promised to be a salad dressing with a tangy twist. And for decades, it found its way into sandwiches, slaws, and potato salads across America. But while it had its fans, plenty of folks were quietly gagging behind their bologna slices. The texture was off, the sweetness was weird, and using it in deviled eggs was an invitation to family drama. Still, it was a fridge staple in many households. Moms swore by it. Some families passed down recipes that strictly said no mayo, only Miracle Whip. But as taste buds matured and health trends shifted, the jar started moving to the back of the fridge and staying there. Today, it's still around, but it's more controversial condiment than beloved essential. Some say it's nostalgia in a jar. Others say it's a culinary crime. We're just glad it's optional now. Betty Crocker Snack and Cake. You know that box in the pantry that only required water and a pan? That was Snack and Cake. No eggs, no oil, no fuss, just mix, bake, and eat. In the 1970s, these one-layer wonders were the answer to every mom's dessert dilemma. Quick, dependable, and topped with a pre-measured sprinkle pack, it was the homemade shortcut that didn't require much home effort at all. The texture, a little rubbery, the flavor, sweet and vague. But as kids, we didn't complain. It was cake, and it was warm, and it showed up on Tuesday nights when no one expected dessert. But as scratch baking made a comeback and people started caring about things like ingredients and flavor depth, snack and cake quietly vanished. Turns out, a cake you could make with water alone doesn't stand the test of time. Today, it lives on in vintage ads and food blogger nostalgia pieces. We remember it fondly, but we're not stocking up. Some shortcuts were never meant to be permanent. Sip and Save powdered drinks. If Tang had a cheaper, louder cousin, it was Sip and Save. These powdered drink mixes came in bulk tubs or budget boxes, promising gallons of artificially flavored refreshment at a fraction of the cost. There was cherry that burned your throat, grape that stained everything, and fruit punch that tasted like melted popsicles left in the sun. But for families pinching pennies, it meant having something, anything, besides water to serve the kids. It was a mainstay at picnics, sleepovers, and school snack tables. You could make it in buckets if you had to, and kids in their sugar-loving innocence often guzzled it like it was liquid gold. But the aftertaste lingered, the colors stained, and eventually parents started reading the labels. Red 40, blue 1, yellow 5. The price was right, but the ingredients? Not so much. As better beverage options filled the shelves, Sip and Save disappeared without fanfare. No one really missed it. We just kind of moved on. It did what it had to do, and thankfully, we've got better options now. Canned mackerel. If canned salmon was tough to love, canned mackerel was its more pungent, even less popular cousin. You opened the can and, boom, an ocean's worth of smell hit your nose. There it was, soft, oily chunks of fish with the skin still on and bones still intact. Sometimes you even got a tail. It was affordable, yes, packed with protein, sure. But it was also unapologetically fishy and looked like it belonged in a bait bucket, not on a dinner plate. Moms mixed it into patties or tried to mask it with sauces, but the flavor always pushed its way to the front. The texture didn't help, soft, flaky, and punctuated by tiny bones that made every bite feel like dental roulette. One wrong chew and you were regretting dinner. For some households, it was a wartime memory or a budget staple that kept people fed through hard times. But let's be real. The moment fresher, more appetizing proteins became affordable, canned mackerel lost its last excuse for sticking around. These days, it's more likely to be found in the international aisle than the family pantry. And for most of us, that's exactly where we'd like it to stay. Tab Clear. Tab was already a strange beast in the soda world, diet, pink-labeled, and oddly metallic in taste. But in the early 90s, Coca-Cola took it a step further with Tab Clear, a transparent cola that looked like Sprite, but tasted like diet root beer mixed with regret. It was part of the clear craze, a marketing trend where food companies stripped products of color to make them seem more pure or healthy. Except Tab Clear didn't feel fresh. It felt like drinking confusion. The flavor was weak, the concept weird, and the branding made no sense. You didn't know whether to expect lemon lime or cola, and what you got instead was a watered-down, bitter something that never found its footing. It barely lasted a year. Consumers were baffled, retailers dropped it, and Coke quietly pulled the plug. In hindsight, Tab Clear wasn't just a failed soda. It was a symbol of the 90s trying way too hard to be cool, and while some retro collectors hunt for cans online, the rest of us are just grateful our taste buds survived the experiment. Tangy Taffy, later rebranded as Laffy Taffy. Before it became Laffy Taffy, it was Tangy Taffy, long, sticky, and stubborn as a piece of chewed gum in a hot car. The packaging was flashy, the colors bold, and the texture? Let's just say your dental work never stood a chance. You needed serious jaw strength to tackle a full bar. And the flavors were intense. Sour apple that bit back, cherry that tasted like cough syrup, and grape that lingered for hours longer than it should. Kids loved it for the boldness, the chew, and the sheer size. But parents, they dreaded it. It stuck to teeth, gums, fingers, and anything within reach. Teachers banned it in classrooms, dentists warned against it, and eventually the formula softened, the name changed, and the bite got tamed. Today's Laffy Taffy is easier on the mouth and the molars, but for those who remember Tangy Taffy, it was less a treat and more a candy gauntlet, the kind of sweet that came with consequences. Orbit Soda. Imagine opening a bottle of soda and finding little gelatin balls suspended inside like a lava lamp you were supposed to drink. That was Orbits, perhaps the strangest beverage to ever hit supermarket shelves in the 90s. Marketed as futuristic and texturally enhanced, Orbits was less about taste and more about the weird experience. The floating balls didn't move until you shook the bottle, and once you did, the drink looked like it was alive. But drinking it, that was the real challenge. The soda itself was vaguely sweet and fruity, but the gelatin orbs were the real curveball. They didn't pop, they didn't dissolve. They just sat there, squishy, chewy, and completely unnecessary. Kids begged for it once, maybe twice. Parents bought it for the novelty, but no one actually liked it. The taste was underwhelming, the texture was unsettling, and the appeal evaporated faster than a .com stock. Today, Orbitz lives on as a nostalgic internet oddity, an icon of 90s excess and edible gimmicks, and honestly, once was enough. Franco-American macaroni and cheese in a can. If you thought boxed mac and cheese was the bare minimum, wait until you met its cousin in a can. Franco-American macaroni and cheese took convenience to new lows, packing soft noodles and a pale, watery cheese sauce into a tin that somehow managed to smell like both metal and school lunch at the same time. It poured out in a single gloppy mass, noodles fused together, sauce clinging in gelatinous clumps. You didn't heat it so much as reanimate it. And the taste? Imagine if cheddar had a twin that was raised in a basement with no light or flavor. It was fast, it was filling, and it was cheap. But it was also proof that not all shortcuts are worth taking. The texture was mushy, the flavor was flat, and the whole experience screamed, food science experiment gone wrong. Eventually, Kraft boxed macaroni became the preferred quick fix. It had color, it had shape, it didn't taste like defeat. Franco-American's version quietly disappeared from shelves, and not a single child cried out in protest. And that tells you everything you need to know. Pillsbury Figurines, diet bars. Back when diet food meant shrinking your meal and your joy, Pillsbury offered figurines, slim beige bars that promised to help you slim down too. They came in flavors like caramel, chocolate, and vanilla, which all somehow tasted exactly the same. Bland. These weren't snacks. They were edible obligations. Each bar was small enough to make you feel cheated and just dry enough to make you regret finishing it. They were marketed to women, with soft pastel packaging and commercials that whispered promises of weight loss and willpower. But no matter how they dressed it up, figurines tasted like compressed sawdust with a hint of artificial sweetness. You'd choke one down and still feel hungry. But hey, if the box said meal replacement, you were supposed to believe it. Thankfully, nutrition science evolved. We learned that joyless food doesn't lead to long-term health, and as people stopped accepting bland bars as breakfast, figurines vanished into the dustbin of diet fads. No one's looking for their return. Aunt Jemima Cornmeal Mush. It came in a box, it cooked into a loaf, and it sliced like a meatloaf, but with none of the flavor. Cornmeal mush was one of those Depression-era staples that stuck around longer than anyone expected. You could fry it, bake it, or eat it straight, though why you'd want to is another question. It was gritty, bland, and sat in your stomach like a brick. But it was cheap, filling, and for a time, practical. You didn't eat it because you wanted to. You ate it because it was there. For breakfast, it might be served with syrup. For dinner, it might be covered in gravy. But no matter how you dressed it, mush was still mush, and kids dreaded it. Eventually, it faded from most households, partly because better options became available, and partly because no one actually missed it. It wasn't comfort food, it was survival food. These days you might find it in regional diners or as a curiosity in Southern cooking. But in most kitchens, its absence goes unspoken and thoroughly unmissed. Fiddle Faddle and Screaming Yellow Zonkers. With names that sounded more like cartoon sound effects than snacks, Fiddle Faddle and Screaming Yellow Zonkers were caramel and glaze-coated popcorn products that aimed to make snacking fun and sticky. Fiddle Faddle was a popcorn peanut caramel combo that glued your teeth together with every bite. Screaming Yellow Zonkers leaned more toward sugar glaze and novelty packaging, boasting absurd jokes and circus-style fonts. Were they delicious? Occasionally. Were they messy? always. These were the kinds of snacks you couldn't eat quietly. They stuck to fingers, molars, and anything else they touched. And while kids loved the sugar rush, adults quickly got tired of the cleanup. Eventually, cleaner, simpler snack options took over. Microwave popcorn, granola bars, even cereal became more snackable than these sugar bombs. Today, both brands have cult followings and retro appeal, but few people are truly wishing for their comeback. Like most novelty snacks, they were fun in the moment. But the moment passed. Tab, the original diet soda gamble. Before Diet Coke became the reigning champ of calorie-free colas, there was Tab, a pink-labeled, saccharin-sweetened soda that tried its best to taste like cola, and didn't quite get there. Launched in the 1960s as one of the first diet sodas, Tab promised all the flavor with none of the guilt. What it delivered was a flavor that danced somewhere between flat cola and chemical aftershock. Still, it found its audience, mainly among women chasing diet culture promises and die-hard fans who developed a weird loyalty to its bitter bite. The aftertaste was legendary. You didn't sip Tab so much as endure it. It was fizzy, yes, but also oddly metallic, like cola that had been left in a tin cup under the sun. For decades, Tab held on. It was retro before retro was cool. But once Diet Coke took off and sweetener technology evolved, Tab's flaws stood out more than its nostalgia. Coca-Cola finally discontinued it in 2020, and while a few loyalists mourned the loss, the rest of us were just surprised it lasted that long. Betty Crocker potato buds. Instant mashed potatoes sound convenient, until you meet the gritty, gluey ghost of Betty Crocker's potato buds. They came in a box, puffed up like packing peanuts, and promised buttery comfort with just a pour of hot water. What you got instead was a pale, pasty scoop of disappointment. The texture never quite resembled mashed potatoes. It was too smooth, too sticky, and always left a film on your tongue. Still, they were a staple in busy households. Cheap, fast, and easy to store, they showed up on dinner plates alongside frozen meatloaf or overcooked pork chops. But as fresh potatoes became more affordable and people realized real mashed potatoes only require a pot and a little effort, potato buds started to lose their appeal. And when better instant brands hit the market, Betty's version quietly took a back seat. Today, if you see them on a shelf, you'll probably keep walking, because once you've tasted actual mashed potatoes, there's no going back to the buds. Cool Whip. It promised to be the perfect topping, light, fluffy, and always ready in the fridge. But Cool Whip's original tub version wasn't whipped cream. It was whipped science, made with corn syrup, hydrogenated oils, and a long list of unpronounceable ingredients. It mimicked the look of whipped cream, but didn't melt, didn't spoil, and didn't taste quite right. Sure, it was convenient. You didn't have to whip anything or worry about peaks. It was always whipped, even after a month in the back of the fridge. But that long shelf life came with a cost, a waxy texture and a chemical sweetness that left many wondering what they'd just eaten. Cool Whip still exists, but its image has changed. Health-conscious shoppers have turned to real cream, coconut milk alternatives, and even aerosol cans. The tub? It's still there, but it's not the hero it once claimed to be. We remember it, sure, but we're not spooning it straight from the tub anymore. General Foods International Coffees. If your mom ever told you to go make herself a treat, there's a chance she meant one of these little flavor packets. General Foods International Coffees came in small tins or sachets with names like Swiss Mocha and Café Vienna. Fancy names, big promises. All you had to do was stir one into hot water and voila, instant sophistication. At least, that's what the commercials claimed. The reality? A weak, sugary beverage with the faintest hint of coffee and a whole lot of powdered creamer. They were more dessert than drink, sweet, syrupy, and barely caffeinated. But they made people feel classy, like they were sipping something European, even if it tasted like melted candy. Eventually, better coffee became accessible. Single-serve machines, fresh ground beans, cold brew. And suddenly, those tins of powdered mocha didn't feel so special anymore. They still exist, but now they're nostalgia, not necessity. A taste of faux luxury we've mostly outgrown. Nabisco Tidbits. If you ever opened a lunchbox in the 1980s, there's a chance you found Nabisco Tidbits, a bite-sized, cheesy cracker that promised flavor but delivered something else entirely. They were small, golden-orange nuggets, kind of like Cheez-Its' second cousins, but with less charm and more aftertaste. The flavor was oddly sharp and artificial, and the texture was somewhere between cracker and cardboard. You didn't exactly hate them, you just couldn't figure out why they existed. For a while they held their ground in the snack aisle. They were easy to pack, quick to eat, and just bland enough to be inoffensive. But when real cheese snacks started gaining popularity, think Goldfish, Cheez-Its, and even string cheese, Tidbits began to look and taste like yesterday's snack. Eventually, Nabisco quietly pulled the plug. No goodbye, no farewell tour, they just vanished. And honestly, no one was asking for more. They were never the star of snack time, just a placeholder until something better came along. Carnation breakfast bars. Before protein bars got hip with superfoods and sleek wrappers, there were Carnation breakfast bars. These were the original on-the-go breakfast, a rectangular slab of sugary oats that claimed to be nutritious and almost convinced us. They came in flavors like peanut butter and chocolate chip, but they all had the same dry, gritty bite that stuck to your teeth like cement. It was part cookie, part brick, and somehow always left you thirsty and unsatisfied. Parents loved the convenience. Here, eat this in the car. And kids tolerated it because the commercial said it was healthy. But let's be real, it was more candy bar than breakfast, and not even a great one at that. As granola bars improved and real breakfast options became quicker and healthier, Carnation breakfast bars quietly faded from view. Today, they're a retro curiosity, remembered by some, missed by few. We didn't get to choose what filled our plates, lunchboxes, and snack drawers growing up. These items were part of our childhoods, sometimes comforting, often confusing, and occasionally terrifying. But here's the thing, we ate them. We made it through. Now, looking back, it's a little easier to laugh, easier to appreciate how far our taste buds and food standards have come. Got a weird grocery memory of your own? Drop it in the comments. We'd love to hear what you endured, what you loved, and what you're glad is gone for good. And if you're still hungry for nostalgia, check out our playlist of vintage food ads and forgotten recipes. Until next time, keep those memories warm and your fridge a little less weird.